Okay. And I need to screen share. Sure.
So, Eric, can people attend these meetups remotely?
Yeah, I think so. They can at least view the live stream, so should be up there. Links and stuff are up in the front, or up in the meetup. So a couple changes, I guess. We did up a new logo. We updated the meetup page so it's not so yellowy ugly. We did a new slide deck. Just have to get around to the site. There were a few complications that I ran into, so I'll have to get around to that. But all the links and stuff are up there, so you guys can grab them for code and slide deck and all that noise. Okay. So I'm Eric, and this is optimizing your JS workflow. We want to do a quick, so there's me, I guess, and all my social media stuff and links and whatever. So I want to do a quick shout out to all of our sponsors. So Assembly, you know, where we're here, Startup Calgary is helping out with a bunch of stuff, Village Brewery, Petrofeed for the beer, and then we're going to have to thank Chris from Vigogo, who paid for all the pizza and stuff. So definitely thank them. This is awesome. So yeah, I wanted to do a quick call out, I guess, for people that are hiring or looking for work. Is anybody looking for work here? Nice. Better than none. All right, sweet.
You're not looking, but you're good. You can still talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, do you want to give a quick shout for all the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'll give you a really quick, what my company's about. I'm at a place called Vigogo. We're actually a company that's been around since 2008. They went more or less bankrupt last year, and we restarted it. All new staff, new management team, and new investors. So we basically got a new startup company going, and we're building payment technology, mostly for the cryptocurrencies. So what we're doing is we're helping that sort of new bleeding edge Bitcoin type company interact with traditional payments and banking. Sort of Gulp there, and we're filling it. So it's a cool company. We don't actually deal in Bitcoins, which means we don't take on a lot of that risk, but we do get involved in that space. It's super hot right now. Investors going crazy. Silicon Valley's going crazy. Like it's in the news every day, so it's sweet. And yeah, we're doing awesome. We're looking to hire a couple more devs. We have 5 right now, and we're going to hire 2 more this summer.
Cool. Thanks, man. So I got word from Jeremy. They're potentially looking for over at App Colony, their local dev shop that's doing both consulting and also some of their own internal products. They're going to be looking for some part-time to start, potentially moving into full-time consultant work for JS and Ruby stuff. And then also for us at Petrofeed, we are looking to hire as well. Our stack is Ruby, Nodejs, and then we're using Component actually on the front end. But if you're one of the positions we're really looking for, even for some part-time work right now, is if you've done any stuff with solar. We want to beef up some of our searching stuff, and we'd like some help with that. All right, so last month, intro to Node.js, NPM, package.json, common.js stuff, a little hello world, and then we went into Socket.io and Express, and then looked at creating a real-time photo sharing app using Feathers. So this session we're going to be covering basically modules and then kind of build tools. I'm going to do a quick little intro to modules. We've already touched a little bit on this 2 sessions ago, so you get an idea. But basically for module, this is how you can define them. Let me see if I can, we'll leave it. So there's a whole bunch of different ways, like patterns you can use to define modules, but this is a pretty common one. pretty simple. You can have, you know, semi-private stuff in JavaScript by basically not exposing it when you expose your API, and then you can expose whatever you feel like. So that kind of brought us to the browser. We had an asynchronous module definition. So the idea is, like, with Node last session, we talked about using CommonJS, which had requires, but the problem is you're dealing with that on the server, and so we can do synchronous requires. Well, in the browser, we don't have that option, so we have to do asynchronous stuff. So this is where AMD or asynchronous module definition came along, and Sharp guy James Burke created a package manager sort of dependency management system called RequireJS that allows you to load these modules so you can split up your files, because typically you'd have files like, you know, you might end up having an index.html, right? And then, excuse me. So you might have, and we get past all of the source. Sorry. So you might have a bunch of functions and stuff like that. You might, this doesn't seem right. That's why. Sorry, my bad. You end up having a bunch of script tags, right? That you're going to load a bunch of scripts, and you need to worry about the order that they come in and stuff like that. Well, the nice thing about having modules and defining them and then requiring them is you can actually set the order yourself, right? Or you can, the dependency manager will make sure that the order gets respected, and that the modules that you've required actually get loaded in the proper order so that they're available when you actually need them, right? So this isn't really a big deal when you just have a couple scripts, but when you have, like, say you want to split up your files into a bunch of small modules, you might end up having hundreds, and then that's really impossible to try and maintain all that stuff. So for AMD, you basically have some specific keywords when you're defining a module. So you have the define, right, keyword, and then you return whatever you're exposing, similar to what we had in the previous module here, right? So we return our API for that module. When you require it, you're actually going to put it as an array, and you're going to specify which modules you need. So here we're requiring the shouter module, and then we have a callback that accepts that as an argument. And then what we can do is we can, again, this is inside of a module, we can expose that, or we can do whatever we want to do with it and then expose our own API. And then in here, this would be kind of our main app, or like our main script or whatever. You're going to require a module, right, which is this guy. Module requires shouter, right? And then I'll actually call some methods on that. Any questions? Does that make sense? Good? Okay, so RequireJS, like I said, it's a module loader and build tool. It was originally built for AMD, but supports CommonJS now, which is kind of nice, because when you're dealing with Node, it kind of sucks to have a bunch of this boilerplate up front, especially if you have a whole bunch of modules that you're declaring that you need. The other thing too is, you know, you could get a little bit fancier, and you could actually potentially share modules client side and server side, right? If you have to have all this boilerplate, it's kind of annoying. There is a way around that, because there's a few different module definitions, so to speak. There's a common one called the universal module definition, which is even grosser, because then it's a ginormous boilerplate. I'll pull one up here so you can see a whole bunch of boilerplate stuff that makes it accessible for Node and server side and for AMD as well. This guy here. So if we go in here, you can see, I'll try and make this bigger. So here we've got a universal module definition, so there's like all this garbage that you need to kind of put in front, which is really, really ugly, right? You know, checking to make sure, you know, do we have exports, because then we're probably in CommonJS and Node, and if we don't, then we're just going to expose it globally, because then there's some people who write really crappy libraries and they just have global variables all over the place, which is like probably your worst nightmare when you're dealing with packages and modules, like having to shim global variables is a pretty big pain. The nice thing is RequireJS actually kind of helps you out there. There's some special stuff that you can do in terms of your configuration to support that. But the idea is that what you can do, RequireJS also supports the CommonJS specification. So it can help you out by if you just change up the way that you define your modules, then you can actually require them the same way you would and expose them the same way you would with Node, right? Which is kind of nice, because then if you have a module you want to share client-side and server-side, you can just do that. The other thing too is well, I mean, it's my personal preference, but I just think it's a little bit cleaner. And it's nice that you don't have to put all that boilerplate in front. But the idea is basically what you do is instead of defining your modules in an array first, you can just pass the callback function as the first argument to define, right? So if we go back here, you can see this module where we actually needed stuff. We're actually going to pass in our dependencies right there, right? And if we go back and take a look, what we can do is just pass in a function and say require exports and module, and RequireJS will kind of shim that for us automatically. And then what we can do is we can just define things, or require things, sorry, the same way that we would in Node. So you just use require, right? You're going to do module.exports or just exports. And so really similar, but it makes it a little bit nicer for going forward. All right. So this is where Browserify kind of comes in, because the idea was, so this is written by Substack, James Holiday. So he had this great idea that maybe you actually don't need to do all this stuff on the browser. Like, you don't need to do all the dependency management and all that stuff. What you can do is you could actually just build all your dependencies server-side and then just ship up a file or a whole bunch of different files to the client that are already kind of have all their dependencies already lined up, right? Not a crazy new idea, but it's been pretty effective, and there's a bunch of different kind of dependency management or bundlers that have followed suit. Actually, RequireJS allows you to do the same thing. You can actually build your stuff server-side as well. So in terms of differences, there isn't like a crazy amount of difference. The nice thing with Browserify is it's probably the most, in my opinion, the most elegant solution, because you don't have to put any of that boilerplate up front. It'll actually just do it for you. It'll shim everything up for you. Now, Component does that as well, and I'll talk a little bit about Component after. But the nice thing with Browserify is you can require whatever you want as if you were in Node. Like, you can require template files, you can require other JS files, and it will bundle all that stuff up for you. The other nice thing is it's pretty pluggable. So people have written a bunch of transforms for it that allow you to do those things, right? So like I said, it's not a whole lot different. The nice thing, though, too, that is supported is because of the way that Browserify works, there's actually, you can use some of the core Node modules in the browser, which is kind of mind-melting. But like, you can use stuff like, I forget which ones. There's very few that you can't use. Pretty much all of them. Like, you can use assert, you can use emitter, you can use like event emitter, you can use all sorts of different ones, which is kind of nice. So in terms of getting it, they all follow pretty much the same formula, more or less, with the exception of RequireJS. You can actually install RequireJS the same way, doing npm install, but typically you'd load a RequireJS script, and then that will then reference kind of your main built script, for example, that has all of your code or all your dependencies. For Browserify, yeah, basically you can install it globally because it provides a CLI. Then you install your dependency, and then you're going to use Browserify, and then your main, and it has a whole bunch of different options that you can specify. So basically, I'm saying here, you know, this is my starting point. Main.js is my starting point, and then I'm going to output to bundle.js, and that's what I would end up shoving in my my script tag, right? So I'll actually like go through and work through a couple so you have a better idea what it kind of looks like. I just want to give a high level of what the different tools are. So then there's Bauer. So Bauer is actually put together by Twitter. It's a client-side dependency management tool. It's similar to NPM in that respect. I guess we talked briefly about it. I think somebody had a question about it last session. It's pretty similar. It doesn't follow the exact same convention, and one thing that's kind of bit me a few times is, and I find it super annoying, is if you want to specify a specific version of a package, you have to use the hash or like £sign rather than using the @ symbol, which I find maybe my personal preference, but it just seems, it always trips me up, and I'm like, I don't understand. Other than that, it uses Bower.json and it leverages GitHub to find the repositories. You can do a lot of the same stuff you can do with NPM, like referencing Git repositories. It actually also has its own registry now, so you can register packages with Bauer just like you would with NPM. You can use, I think you can use like zipped packages and stuff like that too. And then there's Component, which I talked about briefly or just mentioned. It's really similar to Browserify. I would say the main difference is it's actually it's a client-side package manager as well. I think that's the big difference, to kind of one of the bigger differences. So Browserify basically just allows you to build up your dependencies. You would use NPM to install most of them, or you might use Bauer, and we'll actually do that pretty shortly. Component actually allows you to install packages from, and it uses GitHub as the repositories too, but it also will do the building for you. I think the other thing too with Component is you actually need to define a manifest file, which is basically a component.json file. This is why there's a whole, people kind of raging about quit making more .json files, because when you write a library, you have to now have a component.json and a bower.json and a package.json and who knows, another whatever JSON. But one of the really cool things that I like about Component is it actually supports styling, which is kind of awesome. So you can actually install, so the whole idea behind Component is that you have really small components, right? They're self-contained. But the nice thing that kind of comes along with that is the idea that TJ had, or I guess TJ and I'll include everyone, there's a bunch of other guys maintaining it. They had this idea that you could actually have styles that go along with your component. So it truly is like kind of a self-contained component. It's kind of precursor to web components, which we talked about, I guess, 2 sessions ago too. But the idea is that the styling is actually pretty minimal. So it's not like a jQuery plugin, for example, where you could have really invasive styles that are just, I don't know, 50 or 100 kilobytes just for some crappy CSS file. The styles are actually just more for positioning and then allow you to kind of style it however you want. But it's pretty nice because it'll actually do a bunch of the building of your styles together and concatenating them and stuff like that. So, I guess maybe what we can do is, before I move on to actual, like, just straight up build tools, maybe we'll quickly take a look at some of these, what it looks like. All right. So, close a bunch of these. All right. So I wonder if I should just pull up. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna, because I already have it right here. This is perfect. So here we can see, I've written this module as a universal module definition, so you could use whatever tool you want. I talked about the JSON files. They're really not a whole lot different. I mean, we basically have a name, main, version, homepage, all the other stuff. There's nothing too special. They have dependencies and then dev dependencies. It's the same thing. With component, pretty much the same idea. There's little shitty things like they changed it to repo instead of repository, and there's been some big flame war about moving that back. Ideally, I think most people are just looking for consistency, to be honest, myself included. But they're really pretty much the same. And like I said, how you install it, component. So we'll install that guy with a bunch of its dependencies. And as that's going, I'm going to make a little directory for, yeah, you can't cd into one you haven't created yet. All right. So what you can do is you can do component init, no, create. Walk you through a little, sorry, you probably can't see a bunch of that. Yeah, let's do this again. So it'll walk you through a bunch of stuff, like, yeah, sure, photo. And yeah, it has JS and CSS and it has HTML, and apparently it'll blow up on me, which is fantastic. But basically it walks you through creating a component, and we'll scaffold it out. Let me try that again and see if maybe oh yeah, good call. I guess I should read. Thank you. It was complaining about it not being empty, right?
I think it wants username.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, and yes. All right. So it's going to go and have scaffolded out a bunch of stuff for me. Yeah, no. Man, not having any luck. It's because I put it in the wrong directory. But basically we have a component.json file that it's created for me. It's scaffolded a basic CSS file, nothing too special, history, README, and all that sort of stuff. But what I want to kind of show you is you define, so if you want support for styles, you define them in a styles, I guess, array. Same with templates and same with your scripts. You can also have, like we have our development and our regular production dependencies, if I needed those. One of the other things too is component creates a Makefile for you. So this is kind of where I was talking about component plus make, because really you can actually do a lot of the same stuff that these dependency managers, or build tools do with make if you get really fancy and you have a bunch of the command line tools already installed. So I don't follow that, but for example, I did a quick search for like using make instead of Grunt, for example, as a build tool, and this guy's got one that basically does compiles a bunch of your assets and stuff like that. And so, you know, this is how you're going to run it, right? A few different commands here and there. So it's possible to do all that stuff. I personally like the other existing JS tools. If we do Bauer, I think, where is it? So we're going to do Bauer as well. It follows the same sort of thing. It will walk you through the CLI, so I actually won't go through that again for creating packages, but it'll basically do really similar idea. It creates a Bauer _ components directory for all of your potential dependencies and things like that. But I will need it for a little bit later. So I guess before I move on, does anybody have any questions? Because I just kind of gave you like a quick brief overview of the different tools out there. I guess, there really isn't a huge there's not a massive difference between all of them. How many people have used any of these tools before, actually? So a good portion, right? How many people have used Component? Me and Olivia. Okay. Oh, nice. How many people have used Bauer? I'm assuming most everyone else. And RequireJS? Yeah, mostly. Okay. So I guess if we say like little tidbits you can do, so RequireJS can obviously end up with a whole bunch of boilerplate stuff. It supports files and it supports CSS, but it's nowhere near as clean as some of the other stuff. And it also is kind of weird because you need to bring in your own like RequireJS version of jQuery. Let's see here. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so you can do other dependencies, right? Like I was saying, you can do text file, for example, like any templates that you got, and you can do CSS. But if we look, the other thing too that you need to have is you need to have a RequireJS config, and this is where you actually define. You basically tell RequireJS where it can find all your dependencies, and that's one of the nice kind of magical things with Browserify. Is you don't need to do that. It'll actually just find them for you. Because the way you would do it with Browserify is you might do something like so you might do something like this where you have, for my module foo equals require, and then the path to it, like the foo module. Or if I installed it via npm, it might just be foo, like what we talked about last time. Where it becomes really interesting is when you actually have stuff that you've pulled in from Bauer or for component, for example, or stuff that you need. What if you have modules that you need to kind of bring together? Like you have stuff that's been written using AMD for RequireJS, but then somebody else wrote a module you want to use that was written for component. They use different build systems, so it's really hard to be able to do that. And the nice thing is that, like I said, Browserify supports, there's some transforms that have been written for Browserify that allow you to actually grab all of those modules together. So here, let me do one where, so you get a better idea of what I mean. I can do, I'll grab jQuery, and it's going to shove it into a Bauer underscore components directory, right? So there it is. So the issue with this is like, well, great. So I've got a Bauer, let's say I want to actually use that module here. If I wanted to ship this up client side, with any other one, I'd have to either go into, with component, I'd need to go into there and set it up in my manifest file to tell component where it is. If I used RequireJS, I'd have to go into my RequireJS config or like my manifest file for RequireJS and tell it where it can find jQuery. If I were using Browserify without any of the transforms, what I'd have to do is say like, well, from here I'm going to go .. write Bauer and then Bauer components and then jQuery, and then some of the packages have things installed in really different ways, so I'm going to have dist and things like that. That is totally unruly when you have a whole bunch of different packages, because part of the problem too is not everybody follows the same convention where they put what you're actually going to use in a dist directory, so you have to kind of go searching. So rather than manage all of those, what you can do is there's different different transforms for Browserify. Like one of the ones we've got is debauerify. fancy names, right? But the idea is that it will actually automatically resolve your Bauer components. And with Bauer, you can even change the directory that you want your Bauer components to live in. Like instead of it being Bauer underscore components, I can just set it's a Bauer RC file, but then I can just say I want it to be the components directory. Well, the Browserify is I can actually then just say, you know, let's say I need jQuery, I just need jQuery. And it'll just find it for me, which is really, really convenient because then all of your modules behave the same way as if you were doing stuff server-side, which then could lead to actually sharing, making it really easy to properly share your modules both server-side and client-side. So I'll jump back to the slide deck, and we'll talk quickly about Grunt. So I said like there's Make. I mean, I guess anybody who came from Java world has done stuff with Ant or Maven, right? Super cumbersome. We did Grunt last year. The idea is basically you npm install Grunt and then you define a Grunt file, right? It is a little bit more config-like. There are a whole bunch of plugins. If we go to the Grunt website, we'll pull up. I think we'll see how many they actually have. They have quite a few now. I guess the other thing too is I'm not sure if I have. This is a newer computer, so I'm not sure if I've got it. Similar thing where you actually do Grunt init, I believe. Maybe not. I think I need to install it. But this will actually kick up a Grunt file for you to kind of get you started. And the idea is that people would create a whole bunch of, so here we can take a look at this one while that one's going. So like I said, it is a bit more config file-y. It's kind of like basically a big JSON document. But the idea is you define all of your directives, right? Like I'm going to have a JS hint directive, or I'm going to have a node unit for unit tests or whatever. And then I'm going to load my tasks, and then I might load some other ones, some other external modules. And then I'm going to register default tasks. So this was the first one that came around. It's actually quite quick. You can probably, so in comparison to something like Ant or Maven, right? Like dependency file for a large application would compile in like 1 second, right? But some other smart guys made it even better, where they can actually, they created another thing called Gulp. So they did this not that long after. Follows very similar sort of format. You have a Gulp file, you npm install Gulp, but this one's a little bit more code-like. So last time we talked about, with Nodejs, we talked about streams. So the difference between sort of Gulp and Grunt basically is that Gulp is actually using streams. So the idea is you kind of pipe stuff from one to another, like one step to another. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. So, so if we pull this guy up, we'll pull up the Gulp file. So here you can see it's slightly different, right? We're still requiring a lot of the same dependencies. They just happen to be Gulp plugins rather than Grunt plugins. Kind of sucks that you have to actually change your plugins. But basically, same as register, so set our default. So it follows very similar convention in that regard. But rather than having a big nested JSON sort of config file structure, you actually just pipe things from one to another. So, for example, for my less compilation, when I want to turn it into CSS, I'm going to, tell it where to find my main less file. I'm going to basically pipe it through the less function that's going to do the conversion to CSS for me, and then I'm going to shove that into my build directory. Same thing with scripts, and we can actually, uglify it, and we can do all sorts of stuff like that. So nothing too monumental. But what we can do, so let's install. Make sure I've got that. So what we can actually do is we can build that stuff out, and then what that's going to, because I've configured it to go into public build JS for my JavaScript and public build CSS for my CSS, we're going to get a bunch of that stuff concatenated together, and we're going to have this guy minified. That's kind of your basic, build tool dependency, build tool stuff in terms of asset compression, and there's a whole bunch of plugins for that. So I'd encourage you to go and hit up the Gulp website and take a look. It's really, really similar to Grunt. Has a whole bunch of plugins again as well, right? And pretty much all the ones that were written for Grunt have actually been ported over to Gulp. So a whole bunch of stuff, AMD optimize and things like that. But what I can actually do, like I said, with the Gulp file, what I can actually do is I can define some of my different. So with the project that we had, I guess, the last session, we built that real-time photo sharing application, right? Maybe I'll pull that up just so people can kind of see. Sorry, 1 second. And I forget which one we were on. That's not it. Let me see which one we're at here. App index. So we're on 1337. Okay. All right. So if you didn't see this last time, so I can take a photo of myself and shoot it, and there we go. And you guys could take photos of yourselves, and if you're connected to the same server, and it's going to show up on mine. But what we've got is in our JS, we've got two different files. So we've got a main file, and then we've got a camera JS. So Dave wrote these as jQuery plugins, which is still good. But what we can do is we could actually start to, and even with our main, which has a bit more stuff, we could actually start to modularize this a little bit. So we could actually do something where, let's see. So we've got our Bauer components, I think. So we defined a Bauer. No, we didn't. But we're going to. So if I jump into here, so we started to create a Bauer.json. So in that application, sorry, I'll make this bigger. So in that application, we needed jQuery, right? So we're going to grab jQuery, and we're going to install that. Yeah, it's because I've got an empty. So similar to NPM, you can do the same thing where you can actually do -- save. For Bauer, you can do -- save dev, and that'll actually save the that'll actually save it for you in your Bauer.json file if you had one. And then what we can do is we can install Browserify, and I think the other thing that we're going to need is Gulp Browserify. So we're going to need this for our project as well. And then we can actually pipe that stuff for our build. So now this is going to do a bunch of the concatenation for us. So we actually don't need to, we don't actually need to do the concatenation. And what we can do is pull that out. And that should be okay. I need to tell it where my main is. And we're actually going to just use a main.js or an app.js. So I don't know if you caught that. So I've got path scripts here, and then I'm just referencing it here. We're going to tell Gulp that that's the source, and then we're going to pump that through Browserify. And then what I can do is, actually this is fine, just a contrived example so you can see. So we can save our camera equals require camera. We could do .js at the end or not. And is actually just point our Gulp file to main. Okay, so I believe that worked out okay. Yeah, perfect. So what it did is it created we've concatenated and created a main.min. I'm actually not referencing it in the, I'd have to update my index.html to reference main.min. But what I'm doing here is bringing them all together, right? And then what I can actually do is say, you know, $equals require jQuery, and I believe so yeah, this is going to complain that it can't find jQuery, and the difference here is that, remember how I said that there's different transforms? So there's actually, you know, there's dBauerify, which is the one that I'm going to use. There's also ones for component AMD, and something like this, and it'll automatically find the right path for you, which is kind of and like that. Sorry? Yes, thank you. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, this guy, I need to move. Bauer components to public, I believe. Nope, no likey. Hey, bear with me 1 second. Actually, I will pull it up here. Oh, transform. Fantastic. Now this is probably complaining because I moved it from public to here. Fantastic. Okay, so just bear with me 1 second and I will find one where I've already done this. Although I'm not giving Browserify and Bauerify a good rep right now. All right. Oh, yeah, I ran into this before. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so one of the awesome parts about this plugin is it doesn't give you very good errors, and I probably spent an hour debugging with another guy on why we couldn't get his components installed. Because it turns out you actually need to have a Bauer.json file, and you need to have all of the dependencies installed. So we're going to just say jQuery, I believe. We can have that. We'll just take this guy out. And sure, our main can be that. And okay, now hopefully I am correct when I said that. Not. 1 second, sorry. I can actually just show you guys right in here rather than ripping through that one. So, so what I was doing really similar in this project here, so we've got Bauerify as well, and I was actually using handlebars, so I can require handlebars templates server-side and just bundle them all up together. And the idea, like I said, is that we've got our components, which I've modified using a Bauer RC, saying I'm going to put it inside JS components. That may actually be the reason why this isn't finding it. But the idea is that basically we can just require all this stuff here. Let me see if I can get this baby working. We'll try this one more time. No, it doesn't like it. So I'm not sure what's going on. I apologize about that. But I swear that when you actually get it running together, it's a whole lot of win, because when you bring all that stuff together, you actually get to write all your modules as if they were server-side, right? And then you can actually bring them in client-side and share them. So that's pretty much it, I guess, in terms of the stuff for package management and dependency management. I've used all of the tools before. Personally, this is the one that I'm using more now. There are little nuances like that, what I was showing you, where you're kind of fumbling because some of the packages are a bit newer and they haven't put in nice error handling for you. But this is kind of what I like using the best now, because you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you can actually manage your a lot of your dependencies using NPM for server-side and then Bauer for some of the client-side ones. And it's a lot of the same interface. And then you end up with the same the same builds at the end. The other nice thing too, and I'm not sure, Olivia might actually have a better idea with component, but one of the things I've been playing with quite a bit recently is when you get a large application, you obviously don't want to be bundling it into one giant file necessarily, because the problem is like, one of the issues we ran into, and we're still kind of running into at Petrofeed, is we're using component and we have a whole bunch of different components. But we're actually having, because we've got a Rails backend and have to deal with some of the asset pipeline crap, we have one kind of ginormous application.js file that has a bunch of our dependencies already built. And the problem with that is basically whenever we hit a page that we need JavaScript on, we're loading this ginormous file. And really what I'd like to be doing is actually loading a whole bunch of little files, or loading like a common one and then loading a bunch of the smaller ones. So for example, if I hit like one of our maps pages, right, I want to load some of the common stuff and then maps. I don't want to be loading like all of the other stuff that we're using for all the other JS. And the nice thing with Browserify is it actually supports multiple bundles really well. So you can actually do just that, where you have a common, and then you're going to actually say, well, load this one and load this one, and you can define which ones are your common and which ones are your which ones are going to go to the different directories or different files. So you get better caching and you get better and stuff like that. So that's kind of a break, and then Olivia is going to do some demos, I think. Some WebRTC demo. Anyone? Bueller? Okay, awesome. Thanks.